This is a 21st episode and we don't have a theme song, so I'm singing this silly tune. Oh yeah! Jonathan, this is Minsk. Do you read me?
Loud and clear, Minsk.
I've received critical information that Metal Gear Solid is celebrating its 25th anniversary this year in conjunction with the release of the Metal Gear Solid Master Collection, and I need your help in analyzing this critical intelligence.
I can do that, Minsk. I mean, it is one of the greatest and most important video games of all time.
Of all time?
That's what they say. After all, it's sold over 7 million copies worldwide.
7 million. That'll put a big dent in Japan's market of the video games. It'll become a large market share. Huge influence. Metal Gear. Okay, I think that's about enough of that. Hey everybody, thanks for joining us. It's the Minsk and Friends Speakeasy. I'm your host, Minsk.
Still Jonathan.
It's still Jonathan here, helping us out, and so glad you could join us for today's episode here, reaching towards the end of the year. Yeah, we are having a special retrospective episode here, as you all can see. As mentioned, a video game series we both like quite a bit is celebrating nice big round numbers, and there has been a nice remaster release. So we're going to be talking about today about that topic. Huzzah! Before we jump into that, though, we're getting close to the end of the year. We're aiming to have a nice wrap-up end-of-the-year review, our favorites of the year, which this year is going to be tough to nail down to just 5 parts, I believe.
I think so. It's been a great year for games and a terrible year for gaming.
Yeah, so let's just get down to the meat of the topic that we wanted to really talk about. Here is, it's been a weird like mixed signals this entire year. At the same time as we're celebrating like these amazing like kind of milestones in various genres and just real like critical darlings. It's been like the cavalcade of like unfortunate stuff happening on the development sides. Just starting from like simply all the layoffs being hit on so many fronts. Like, who was the worst one now of all the layoffs happening? It was one of the big ones.
It'll probably have to be a combination of like what's going on right now with Blizzard, I think, or no, the people who made Destiny.
Right, yes, Activision, that's the one, yeah, I'm thinking of, yeah, right during the Microsoft merger, like, this shit happens.
Right, and it was right after, like...
Oh, no, wait, sorry, that's Bungie. Bungie, I'm sorry, is the Destiny guys, but same deal, honestly, the same situation, and also crummy.
Yeah. And like, they had just been promised that, nothing would happen, and then people would not be laid off, and then it's like being laid off right at the end of the year, with the time when nobody's hiring, with people trying to get ready for Christmas, and suddenly because American employment contracts being what they are, it's not like here in Europe where you actually get a proper severance and you can land on your feet for a couple of months. You're out of a job.
Your reward is you can write down something on your CV that'll hopefully give you something in the future. I guess, unfortunately.
And I was reading from GamesIndustry.biz. They reported that over 6,000 game industry jobs have been lost in 2023 so far.
Jesus, no.
Yeah, and that was at the start of October. So that was even before the Bungie announcement.
Oh my god. Okay.
Yeah, so like, and 11 studios have faced full shutdowns. And like Embracer Group was one of the major ones as well, because like they had just bought, a ton of studios over the last, 5-6 years.
Yes, Embracer Group's strategy has been completely confusing for several years now. They just went on this buying spree with no clear goal, I feel like, what they were trying to achieve with just buying so much stuff, including the freaking licensing rights to Lord of the Rings. Do you remember that fact? Like they own like all the like licensed media of Lord of the Rings is now in their hands for some reason.
Right, and then we got the amazing Gollum game from that.
Yeah, that was the payoff. Oh dear.
Right, but they had the whole thing that they are affected, like Crystal Dynamics, Beamdog, Rainbow Studios, Volition, Gearbox, like all of those got affected by what they were calling restructuring, which was just an elaborate way of saying layoffs. And like Epic Games laid off 800 people or something. Amazon laid off people from Twitch, despite that Twitch was still doing, massive numbers. Microsoft laid off 10,000 people. It's been absolutely insane. And Microsoft's 10,000 people is not just people in their gaming department, but like globally from Microsoft in general. But that also included people from Bethesda and I think 343, the Halo studio.
Yeah, exactly. Which is it's it's this stupid like how like busted this whole system is, in that if you have you think that if you have a really good year, like games sell a lot, like that's when like the bonuses come, everybody gets a piece of the pie. But what seems to be is when you have like a really good year and everything sells really well, that's when a bunch of people get laid off, because then that just ensures that number's going to be even higher for the like rest of the like fiscal year, since you're not paying these people's wages. So it's completely messed up that happens.
Right, and especially since that this year was again the like one of the major years when the game industry grew again. Like the video game industry at the end of the year has been, the industry worth is around $214 billion with a B.
Right.
So it's been rising consistently, and it's been a one of constant growth. It is the biggest entertainment industry on the planet. And yet gaming, the salaries have stagnated. People are being let go. And like this was something I was looking at, because like I'm a part of a bunch of narrative designer groups.
Right.
People who are both already in the industry helping us out who want to get into the industry. And it was horrible to see like people from like BioWare who are suddenly let go without any warning. And these are people who've been there since like the first Dragon Age, who have written like the person who created like Varric, who is one of the like most beloved characters in the Dragon Age series,
right,
was just unceremoniously let go. Just announced one morning that, hey, you no longer work here, and given like 15 minutes to collect their stuff and leave the building. And it's like just as they announced that they're working on a new Dragon Age and they're working on a new Mass Effect, and it's beyond me how the people in the C-suite, function, how they think that any of this is going to work.
There's such a disconnect between those people. Yeah, you mentioned the like real big executives. It's just like incredibly short term. Just thinking about like, well, this action will bring us like a ton of money right now, and then we can figure it out. Like, we can figure out later on. I don't even know if they're thinking about later on. It really might be that short-sighted. I don't really understand it. Because, like, I had also written down, like, myself about the bizarre Unity situation with the Unity engine, where they, like, tried to add that monetization on top of, like, the use of Unity. And which was just no one appreciated that. Like, the deal was that, like, it would retroactively, if you made a Unity game, you would even retroactively have to pay Unity like a portion of the sales of your game, of the downloads, is how I understood that. Which, Unity has been used in so many game engines now that there are tons of games. And, its kind of selling point was that it was, a cheap alternative and easily available and usable. So, which means that a bunch of smaller scale companies who can't exactly pay a giant retroactive fee like that would be hit really badly by this choice.
Yeah, and I mean this comes right at the heels of I think it's now former CEO John Riccitiello, I think his name is.
Something like that.
Yeah, but I think he also left the company now after doing a bunch of damage to Unity, what it was. But he announced that this was all about preparing themselves for a higher growth and making Unity, more profitable. And this comes like right at the heels of them laying off 900 people,
Right.
like in two batches. I think it was like 600 at the start of the year or at the end of the last year, and then another 300 this summer. And it's just like it is baffling to me that their idea of that we're gonna create growth by firing the people who've been with us, who can actually who actually bring us this value, and then we're gonna alienate the entire gaming industry with this short-sightedness.
Yeah.
That's gonna help.
Yeah, like it's completely nuts. Like, how are they gonna ever sell anything to any of these developers again? I've read a bunch of people who are now scrambling to like be like, I gotta learn some entirely different game engine because this is too much of a risk. Like, this might like hurt our production so bad. So it's nuts. Did you know that the same thing happened earlier this year in the tabletop gaming world?
Really?
Yes, like Unity could have learned from this example, but they chose to be just as boneheaded. Wizards of the Coast, who make Dungeons and Dragons, it was leaked like that they were planning to make their license retroactively also like have a retroactive fee on their license, because the base rules of Dungeons and Dragons for the last 20 years have had an open gaming license, kind of like open source software, and there's been like a cottage industry of people making supplements to the Dungeons and Dragons game, their own adventures, their own extra rules, and it's been totally okay so far because it's been, again, basically open source for RPGs. And then this like came out that they're like, yeah, we're gonna like change the wording on the license to be like we get a share from everything that uses this license, including, again, apparently the wording would have implied that products that have existed for years and years now, which would mean like regular retroactive payment. And yeah, it just completely tanked Wizards' reputation as well in like the tabletop world. It's so bizarre what anybody was thinking in that situation.
Right. That's insane. And it's one of those things where you're like, because like they had a interview with the people who made the Final Fantasy VII remake and now Rebirth. And one of the questions that everybody was asking is like, hang on, how on earth did you manage to, because this is less than 4 years in between games. And then
it was like 2020 when it released the first part, the remake. Yeah,
so 3.5 years, and then Rebirth looks to be like massively bigger than what remake was.
Oh yeah, like all my concerns previously about like are they gonna like be able to fit all that stuff like that I've been voicing, like kind of melted with that last trailer that showed so much content. It's kind of nuts.
And the big question to them was like, how did you manage to do this in this kind of time? And they just said, well, we have the same team that's been working with us for 20 years,
right?
And like we haven't, like we've only lost maybe a couple of people here and there over time because they've gone somewhere else. But the whole thing that we have just kept and cultivated this group together. And everybody was acting like this was some kind of a massive revelation. Like, oh man, who knew?
Who knew? Properly, motivated and like funded and supported, like workers will like actually be motivated to do a good job. Yeah, that's a real revelation.
Right, and also that we have actually people who know the product and know the tools that we're using. And this has been like the same thing with Nintendo, that has a really small turnover, and like it is consistently one of the things that I will never understand about the people accepting this kind of belief that constant growth is something that we should aspire to, because it does not lead to innovation, and it does not lead to any kind of artistic achievements that we could get. Instead, because I think there's also the people at Unity and also the people at like these places that have been firing a bunch of people, like BioWare said that, well, we have to cut costs because development costs are so high. And it's like, well, the game does not need to cost hundreds of millions of dollars. Like,
right.
It like if you just make a good game, It doesn't matter, if you're using graphical materials that people can't properly run even.
Yeah.
And like you look at Nintendo, their games are constantly massive hits,
Mm.
and they're still running on the Nintendo Switch hardware that was already kind of dated when they released the Switch.
Yeah, exactly. It's like they're basically a generation behind in tech terms, like for sure. But it just consistently doesn't matter since they squeeze out so much good out of the games they make, and yeah.
Yeah, I'm just now playing through Super Mario Brothers Wonder.
Yeah.
And it's a joy to play. And like if you told me that this was still running on like what is essentially mobile hardware,
Yeah.
I could not be able to point out to you where those pitfalls of that lie, because it looks beautiful. The art style makes up for whatever technical limitations it might have, and it's just so beautifully designed that I'm all for it. And this has been a spectacular year for Nintendo releases, and especially if you're an RPG fan, because you've just been constantly getting great RPGs, and we're still looking forward to Super Mario RPG coming out, I think, at the end of this month.
Yeah, and later on Paper Mario, they announced that as well, which was probably the smart move to do after the giant, like, hype wave for Mario RPG. So, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and it's just, I really wish we would get out of this really terrible vicious cycle of people just expecting that the next game that comes out has to be better graphics and better production values and everything, when really all it would take is that it would just be a good game. And I don't think it's naive to believe that people would buy a good game, regardless of how it looked.
I mean, we've already seen that with, like, Undertale, which was a giant hit, back in the day, and it wasn't that far. It wasn't that long ago. Like back then, games looked like that. That was like 6-7 years ago or something. And it's like 8-bit Nintendo graphics basically, and still becomes like the biggest game in the world for a hot minute there. So yeah, I don't know.
I will make a prediction though, and then we can talk about this in another podcast because it'll be probably a different topic. But I think that handheld gaming is going to make a massive comeback.
Interesting.
And I think that is going to hopefully force studios to rethink their approach to these massive budget games. That's my dream and that's my hope, but I really do think that with the way that we've seen the release of the Asus ROG, what was it, the handheld thing that they made?
Right.
We just saw a surprise update to the Steam Deck OLED. There's now talk about the next Switch coming out next year. Mobile gaming has become even bigger. It was already huge, but it's getting bigger. I actually just tested and I'm reviewing a couple of mobile gaming controllers that have been specifically made for them.
Oh, interesting.
And like I do think, and now we got the PlayStation Portal coming out at the end of the month as well, which is like a controller that has an OLED screen on it that looks really similar to what the dream of the future PlayStation Vita was like. But that is something that allows you to remotely play your PlayStation 5 in your house or anywhere if you have a Wi-Fi connection. And I do think that this is a sign that they are kind of dangling their feet in the water and seeing would there be an interest, because the Switch is still I think it's still one of the biggest platform sellers of all time. It's still selling like hotcakes.
It is, yeah, and their big update was just Switch with OLED when people were hoping for like bigger hardware, and like the enthusiasts did have like a kind of like a aww reaction when that was it, but it hasn't like slowed them down at all, basically, in the long run.
Yeah, and like I have a Switch OLED and a Switch Lite, and the Switch Lite has been with me on every single business trip that I've done this past year. And like every time I've gone, like if I go on a longer commute to work anywhere or anything, it's with me and I play it. And I think it's probably my most played console of the past generation.
Nice.
So I really do think, and I think that if these places are trying this, I would not be surprised if we started hearing rumors that we would be getting a revitalized PlayStation Vita or something like that, because OLED technology has gotten cheaper, and it's more ubiquitous, and people already, like younger generations, are playing more on mobile.
Yeah,
and we already have the whole, like, Xbox has that really great Xbox streaming onto your phone. So I wouldn't be surprised if there would eventually become a race to see who is the first one to get a really good handheld console out, and have it so that you can play in the same way like how we have the Steam Deck, that you could play the PlayStation games on a proper handheld. Like, you wouldn't have to, it wouldn't have to be that you buy games specifically made for the handheld, but you would be playing PlayStation experiences just with downgraded graphics.
That all does sound great. I would hope, as someone who also, like, a lot of my gaming is specifically, while I'm on the bus. So just from that side, I would hope for that. Unfortunately, the problems with the industry that we discussed a moment ago are so fundamental that this shift won't, like, make things better for the developers alone, unfortunately. I can't imagine, like, oh, well, suddenly, there has to be some kind of culture change in general with development of games to make it, equitable for everybody. But
one would hope. But this is again, it's optimism, and I really hope that something like that would happen. But this year has been really rough on that whole optimistic side. And it's been rough watching, not just in gaming, but in everything. It's been a kind of a bummer of a year.
Yeah, no, I'm at the moment not feeling super optimistic. I'm a little worried. Like, I know the talk about the bubble has been, like, for a decade now, but I don't really know how this remains sustainable. For, like, at least let's put it this way. I don't think a year with this kind of, like, amount of games in this many genres all being this amazing I don't think you can assume something like that will happen again, because this all these layoffs and other, like, cutting corners are going to catch up with the quality of the high output. Like, I'm not, like, super doomer, like, saying, like, video games are done. I'm just like saying, like, it's gonna be a year. There are gonna be years where, like, the quality output is gonna be not so broad, I guess, is the point I'm saying.
Oh, absolutely. I highly doubt, like, because this year was so stacked. Like, October of this year was insane. Like, I think I reviewed 6 games in the span of a month.
Yeah.
And I still have a backlog of stuff that I have played, but I haven't had a chance to write about yet. Like,
yeah.
I'm running like a month behind. So I think that people should already prepare for next year to be a very lean year. Unless Nintendo does something really, really wacky and, goes full on with the Switch 2 release, which people have been rumoring. But, like, I really do think that the next year, and maybe even the year after that, are going to be quite lean years for gaming. We'll probably see 1 or 2 big announcements, but I would really be surprised if we had anything resembling this kind of a year in another 2, 3, maybe even 4 years.
Yeah, but if perhaps us players as gamers can also have a bit of a culture change and realize that there is quite a few games. Thankfully this year is so stacked, people can maybe afford to play through that backlog in the future.
Yeah, because there's a ton of indie games. I'm actually planning on an article on just indie games that you may have missed, because I've been playing so many indie games that people have been sending me, and I just haven't had a time to cover them. But I really would want people to know about them, because their games don't have the money to make a big ad campaign, and they can't compete with Alan Wake 2 or something like that. But they are still really great games, and they're the kind of stuff that I hope that people will pick up now, that once the hypes are dying down and once people finish playing what they're playing, And I think that next year will hopefully be this kind of, hey, holy shit, how did this game come out and nobody heard about it?
Here's, fingers crossed that maybe that'll be like, some solace in this field if like there really is kind of a, if the wave is now cresting back down, then, maybe that's a chance for something to rise up that would have been overlooked here in the other time. I don't know. I'm not a prophet. I can't speak with authority on that front.
Indeed, but we should probably get to the main topic.
Yeah, let's freaking go do a little bit of time traveling here to discuss Metal Gear Solid, the classic sci-fi, military sci-fi stealth action game from Konami from 1998. Of course, for a lot of people, that was the first part of the series that they played, but in truth, it was installment number 3 of the Metal Gear series. If we really quick historique here, we want to go really back in time. A young man called Hideo Kojima joins Konami in making electronic games in the 80s. His first work is a game called Penguin Adventure in 1986, which I looked up. It's a cute, like MSX forward-scrolling, like action game. Pretty cute. I'm not clear what he did because he doesn't even show up in the credits of the actual game. It's just really funny in hindsight, given what a big name he is now. But yeah, a year after Penguin Adventure, he is put in directing an action game called Metal Gear, where through the production he realizes that the MSX can't really run enough sprites of enemies on the screen to make a proper action game. So he gets the bright idea to make a stealth game, which will, apart from, being a, change in the genre, because something a little new in the gaming space at the time, it'll also like limit the amount of enemies by nature of the player trying to avoid them. And there's a apocryphal story that some Konami exec was like, a game where you avoid fighting enemies? That's never gonna catch on. Which, well, the rest is history, I suppose. Have you ever played the first Metal Gear, out of curiosity?
I have. I've actually played both of the Metal Gear and Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake.
Right, which came out a few years later, 1990. He got to come back on that. So, what do you think of those?
I mean, I never played them when I was a kid because they never came out on the Nintendo here in Finland.
Right, yeah. I mean, like I said, I think a lot of people, Metal Gear Solid was like the first go, since that was the first big push, which is why it's really funny that they, really do, like, it really is a sequel, because they talk about the events of the last 2 games quite a bit. So it must have been like, wait, what's going on? What did I miss? When someone played that for the first time.
Yeah, I played them for the first time when the Metal Gear Solid 3 Subsistence came out on the PS2.
Yeah.
Which must have been 2004, 2005?
Something like that. That was the first time that the MSX versions got ported in the West. The first Metal Gear had a NES port. That's a little bit known, but, that was the big one. That was the Subsistence collection.
Yeah, and that was the one that I remember like trying them out and really getting into them. And I would argue, and I'm going to ask you how you feel about this. Have you played them?
I've played the first one. I haven't had a chance to play Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake, but I remember watching one playthrough of it, so I'm aware of both of them.
Because I would argue that Metal Gear Solid is kind of a remake of Metal Gear 2.
Solid Snake. Oh yes, that's absolutely true, because there are a lot of like reused set pieces and like encounters that show up again. It's rather funny in that sense.
Right, because I remember like when I played it, and I had to actually go and replay them again because it's been 20 years.
Yeah.
So I had to go replay them, and I actually now got a chance when I got the review copy of the Master Collection, which is its own can of worms because it's not a very good release.
Okay.
But I went to play them, and I was looking at them going like, hang on, like, this has the whole set piece of you having to go and rescue somebody close to Roy Campbell. Except it's not Meryl in this one. It was another character. But then you also have to fight, ninja, a black ninja or something like that. And then Gray Fox shows up in it, and like it's got a ton of these kind of elements that there's even the whole elevator fight.
Exactly. That's the one that comes to my mind immediately. Is he twice had an encounter against like 4 guys on an elevator, and weren't they invisible in Solid Snake as well?
Yeah, they were, and it's a whole big thing of like you're not alone in the elevator.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good set piece, but so I guess I can see why he wanted to like do it again. But
yeah, and I will actually say that I don't actually mind, because I do think Metal Gear Solid is my favorite game in the entire series.
Right.
And I think it's the one that has the perfect balance of Hideo Kojima's wacky ideas, and also the perfect balance of hardware restrictions to keep a lot of that wackiness in check before it gets too overbearing.
Right. I absolutely understand what you're saying. Like, it's compared to like immediately after that, like Solid 2, like Metal Gear Solid is a breezy game. It's something you can enjoy rather simply, even though it does have long cutscenes. It's still kind of it feels, I wouldn't say arcadey, but it's like a really manageable game in its scope in that sense.
Yeah.
So basically, Metal Gear Solid. So after Metal Gear 2, Solid Snake, which what I watched is a pretty cool game. These are pretty cool games, even though like they're really showing their age.
I mean, they're insane for what they are. Like, considering the technological limitations of what they were, it's insane, and also the fact that Kojima was in his 20s when he designed them, and how pure the vision is.
Yeah,
I would say that they are really remarkable games for the time.
The ambition is already there. Like, even the kind of like kind of cinematicness, you can feel it in Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake. There's like all those dramatic cutscenes and like set pieces that Snake has with the characters in that. It's cool, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
And then, in 1994, he takes a jaunt. Well, I skipped over Snatcher, which was already an example of this. In 1988, he made like this cyberpunk pastiche adventure game, which was heavily riffing on Blade Runner. I think he got in some trouble for how much Blade Runner was being used in Snatcher, but then later on, he still keeps up with the cinematic storytelling. Now he's ripping off Lethal Weapon, but in space, when he makes Police Knots in 94. I say ripping off, but that's maybe a mean word. But it does have a very obviously Mel Gibson lookalike, and the other guy, oh god, I completely blanked out on what Murtaugh.
Danny Glover,
of course, yeah. They're very obviously based on them, the leads in Police Knots. And I believe you had just played it recently, so you had some fresh impressions on that.
Well, I think that my biggest impression with that, because I had to go and find the emulator for it, because, again, there's no really fully official version of it ever ported to the West. It's fan translations and all kind. But one thing that I had forgotten about this, and I was amused to see, is that Meryl Silverberg makes an appearance as a major character.
She does. It's hilarious. It's like a character that, and because this is before Metal Gear Solid, this is like her first appearance.
Right, and it's not even a case of like, oh, it could be her. It's like her name is Meryl Silverberg. She has the same tattoo that she has in the Metal Gear stories, and she's even paired up with a guy called Dave, who then is, of course, David. That is Solid Snake's name.
Yeah. Like it totally. Some of the lines don't exactly fit with what the later canon of Metal Gear Solid is, but the total implication is that Police Knots is set in the same universe as Metal Gear Solid. It's very funny, especially because Meryl is older in Police Knots compared to her appearance in Solid. So it's it's rather cheeky, but I like it.
It is, and but Police Knots is one of those games that, like, looking at it now, you can see again where the limitations come in, and also Police Knots has a bunch of things that are a little bit harder to swallow, I think, today. Like, in terms of like the humor is, even by Kojima standards, it's quite how do I put it? It's gratuitous
Yes.
in many ways, and it's very juvenile in a bunch of ways.
And Kojima's problems with female characters are now starting to pop up in his stories. Like, I'm pretty sure, like, there are a lot of opportunities to grope women in Police Knots. I think the goal. I'm pretty sure he was like he was wanted to be like you can like kind of grope every woman in the game or something, and they're all very contrived and kind of not cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of that, and a lot of it got toned down later in his games. And even though it would occasionally pop up in really, really ugly ways, like with the Metal Gear Solid 4, with the whole Beauty and the Beast squad.
Yeah, I feel like it started to get like worse later in his career, unfortunately. Like, 'cause there's that, and then Quiet in Metal Gear Solid 5 is also like a pretty bad character.
Yeah, just really pointlessly gratuitous, and it's a weird thing to have for somebody who is so can be so eloquent about the film influences and so eloquent about the stories that they tell, that it's one of the weirdest things about him as a storyteller and game designer, that is the kind of impulse that comes out and really like it stands out so bizarrely that I've never been able to kind of fully understand, why it's there.
He's a guy who has weird predilections on that front, and like I guess people don't know to tell him no. Is best I can say on that, I guess.
I guess so, but like having said that, Police Knots was another example of like how far Kojima had gone in his early career, because this was like 94, I think.
Yes, 94.
Right, so he was like 30 when he made this.
Yeah, something like that. And yeah, and as mentioned, his first game that he just helped out on, Penguin Adventure, was less than a decade ago, 1986.
Right, so he was 20 about then.
2022 or something, yeah.
Yeah, but like this is one of those things, like, I think this, out of all of his games, I think Police Knots is the one that I would have seen most easily work as a anime. It could have worked as a feature film.
Well, basically, because the gameplay basically is almost like watching it. It's a kind of a weird point and click adventure, like, but not exactly like it's not like the Mel Gibson character is walking around on the screen when you point and click. It's like this kind of first person point and click. It's very visual novelty in that sense. So it's yeah, definitely like primed for an anime adaptation in that sense.
Yeah, and that's the weird thing. It's like, even as cinematic as Metal Gear is, and if we want to even jump further, even as like Zone of the Enders, how cinematic they are, I don't think any of them would work as a film because they are way too talky and way too exposition heavy.
Right.
And it's one of those things where, like, when people say that Kojima could make a good filmmaker, I don't think he would, because his style of storytelling is very much predicated on that you have to accept that this is a game and that he's going to be doing a bunch of weird ass things with already the game format.
Right. I get that vibe. Yeah. But Police Knots is a little more like pared down on that. It's got interesting concepts about like the the governance of like space life and stuff. It's got really cool visions on that, but it's still more down to earth.
It is. It's also, it's for the first sign that Kojima really likes repeating the storylines about genetics and about family and about all that. That is one of those things that we start really noticing that, oh, this is going to be a thing that he does, because like there's a huge plot line about blood transfusion and bone marrow transfusions.
Exactly.
And parental the whole nurture versus nature kind of things. And I think that's something that once you notice it, you notice that this is where it starts, and then it starts going really off the rails in the Metal Gear games.
Yeah, and let's finally jump into like the main one we're celebrating here. 1998 this game comes out. I don't remember how many years he was producing it, but yeah, this was now their big break for the new PlayStation console, is to make a new entry in Metal Gear. And now Kojima, now the hardware is there. We talked about limitations, but now the hardware is good enough to allow like this like really stylized cinematic vision that he wants. It's not just going to be a top-down stealth game. Now it's going to be like, maybe hyperbole to say like Hollywood quality, but that's what they're shooting for in the presentation. So they make like Metal Gear Solid a new entry in Metal Gear where Snake goes on this. Solid Snake is put on this mission to infiltrate a military base with nuclear silo in it, taken by terrorists with big production values for the time. The music is really like thought out. There are elaborate cutscenes. There's the graphics were like mind blowing for the PlayStation era. It's like a big up the wazoo game now.
Right, and again, this is something that if somebody listening doesn't really know or doesn't care about these usually, but the PlayStation at the time was, hugely influential and about where games were going to be going, and it was hugely powerful. But this was a game that had 2 megabytes of RAM, of random access memory, and 1 megabyte of virtual RAM. And like it was running at what the CPU was a 33 megahertz,
Yeah, small numbers in this day and age.
Yeah, like if you consider that a phone these days, the cheapest phone you'll find is more powerful than what the PlayStation was at the time.
Yeah, it's March of Technology is funny like that.
It is. And so in that sense, and like the first Metal Gear fit on a single CD. It wasn't even a DVD, it wasn't anything like that. So it was like it was less than 700 megabytes, which is what a CD could hold.
Well, Metal Gear Solid was on 2 CDs.
Oh right, it was. That's right.
That was on 2 CDs because there's that scene where they reference it in Metal Gear Solid 4 in the same place where you're supposed to change the CD.
Oh right, and it's like they have a talk that it's a Blu-ray, doesn't need to change discs.
Yeah, the wonders of the PlayStation 3. Yeah, right. Exactly. But but still, we're not a huge production because it's kind of funny too that second CD does not have a ton of content.
I think that's why I forgot about it because the second disc is basically like we just could not fit everything onto the first disc. So the second disc I think had maybe a couple of boss fights. Yeah, and that was it.
There's like 2 like Foxhound guys left at that point, and then the like everything involving the final stuff. So and that's what has the infamous backtracking moment with the 3 keys, which definitely I'm pretty sure is meant to just try and kind of like pad out the length at that point. It's kind of my least favorite part of the game, at least gameplay wise. But
it is. But I think the one thing I would like to start out with pointing out is like because you mentioned it's not a big production, but I think this is exactly where this is what I would call the George Lucas syndrome, in that because they had so little money and they had such limitations they were doing a new thing with graphics and they were wanting to show up the Nintendo with this kind of these polygons that were like you could manipulate in real time and that would be in 3 dimensions. So they had to plan out the entire level design with Legos and have like the camera placements.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and like Kojima spoke about this. This was like years and years ago when they released like I think it was a re-release for the Vita or something. They did a little documentary on this, and Kojima talked about how it played hell on his family life because they would spend months building the Lego things so that they could see exactly that if we put a camera here, how much will that camera see, and at what point do we run out of memory?
Right, that makes sense. Yeah, because they couldn't just storyboard. Like they needed some something tangible. Okay.
Right, and then that took ages because you can imagine they're building Legos on 3D areas, and if they have to like move an entire area, Legos are not the easiest thing you can move around with. So
No,
and,
no.
and it was so that Kojima remembers that his son, he had just had like a kid at the time, and his family was really concerned because he was working long hours, and his son at one point came to the office and went to his mom and complained that dad is only playing with Legos. Like, that's all he does.
Oh, that's funny. Oh, I would be terrified of like knocking over that thing if I was working on something that critical.
Yeah, but I think that
Legos.
this is exactly though what makes the game so special, is because if you now look at it, like I've been playing it a lot now for the review and playing a lot just for this podcast, and there isn't a single wasted space in that game. Like, everything about it has been planned to perfection. Like, there's no rooms where you think that, oh, this is just here for, show, or this is just something that they, kind of threw in because they needed a room here.
Yeah.
It's everything about it has a little detail to it. And I think that that's the kind of thing that it's limited in scope, but it's so dense and so rich in material that people are still 25 years later, finding things about it and going around and just enjoying the fact that something as limited as the PlayStation could pull off something as insane as this.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like, it's a fun, how do I put it? It's just it feels like a really well realized, like a real place. That's not, I don't know entirely, but like, yeah, the space is iconic. Like, I can like imagine like almost every room of like the Shadow Moses complex. And I haven't even played the game that many times, but like, it's still like, yeah, I totally remember the route you take in the game throughout the entirety of the game. And yeah, it's kind of a marvel in that sense as a technical thing.
And I remember, like, last year, I think last year you did a long playthrough of the game.
Yeah, I can't quite, was last year, 2 years ago, but yes, because it got the PC port at the time for at Good Old Games, and I was like, well,
Yeah.
now's as good as time as any to go back here.
Yeah, that was last year, and I remember watching it, and that was one of the cases where I remember I made a mental note that I have to remember this, because you were doing something toward the very end of the game, and there was a little detail involving like the snowfields and like a wall, that if you go against a wall and do something, you get like an extra scene or something like that. And I remember,
Yes. It's a liquid parachute that you can find that spawns like an extra little discussion about what happened to Liquid.
And I remember just thinking at the time that, like, it's been 24 years at the time, and I did not know that was there. And it's just little things like that are something that consistently make me happy, and realize that there is so much in that game that was thought out and was really lovingly put in place. So I think that's what makes it special to me as an experience, because like it has aged and is dated in some ways. Like the controls are not as great as they could be.
No, yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, but like apart from that, like it's such a joy to play, because it's so out there and so wild in terms of like how many risks it takes for a game that was arguably the first that many people in the West ever saw of its kind.
Yeah, and in fact, let's really quickly think about that, because I thought there's like two like revolutions in like games that this presented, at least to the people at large, and I'm wondering, like, wasn't my thoughts too true? The first is that I think this was like the stealth genre. I feel like this hit people for the first time, like that concept. Even though, again, this is the third Metal Gear game, but like Metal Gear on the NES was not a huge thing in the day, and 2 never came to the West. And but I was thinking, like, I did check that Thief came out the same year as Metal Gear, the Thief: The Dark Project. And also Tenchu came out the same year. So there was this push for stealth games, but I just don't feel like those two like they're highly regarded by fans of the genre, but I don't feel like they pushed the envelope on that in the same way yet, I feel like.
I think so, because like I love Tenchu, but like that was always a it's more like a cult classic than
exactly. Yeah.
And that's like I know that people who are fans of it would argue that it's a major game and that, but I don't remember it ever selling like that much. And the first Tenchu never got an official European release, or like a Finnish release at least, but then Tenchu 2 did get one.
Yeah, that's the one I remember playing. So yeah, I guess that says something about the like broadness of it.
Yeah, and they're great games. I wish they would get a remake or a new Tenchu game in the series, but none of them made the kind of impact. The Thief is the one I would argue that was probably because it was PC only.
Exactly, that kind of.
Yeah, I never got to play it until like much later, but I would argue that may have had a audience that really created like what they were expecting in terms of sneaking around games. But Metal Gear, I think, is the first one that really broke the barrier and had everybody talking about it, like even people who were not really gamers.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah, and I feel like this kind of stealth, the idea of avoidance, like being like actually like the cool thing of enemies. I really don't feel like anything else quite did it earlier in such a broad mass appeal way. Is my feeling.
Absolutely. One thing I wanted to ask is about like how did you play Did you play this on the PlayStation when it came out, like in '98, or did you play it later?
I was a late adopter. I actually my friend had the PC port like way back in the day, so that's how I knew it at first, like watching him play for a bit. But I remember we would get stuck in the beginning. Because of the infamous calling Meryl, getting Meryl's codec frequency thing.
Yes,
I have a memory that we got like really stuck with that. I think so I didn't get a huge amount, but the one I actually played Metal Gear Solid 2 myself. Was the first one I ever got to play myself. Sometime later I got to play Solid 1, then on the PSX. But I was a late adopter in that sense. So only kind of like knew that it was this hype thing back in the day.
Yeah, but I remember Metal Gear Solid 2 was even bigger, because after everybody kind of realized that Metal Gear Solid was a big thing.
Yes.
And then like, because this was back at the time when Finland still had game conventions. And I remember when they premiered the trailer for this one, at the convention, people just went absolutely insane, because this was like just before internet became a thing that everybody had it and everybody could find all these. This was like 2000, and we got the first trailer, and that was a huge thing.
Yeah, and I also remember like Zone of the Enders was packaged with the demo for MGS2, and that like sold Zone of the Enders units. Like I've seen people joke that like it sure was nice of Konami to pack this video game with the Metal Gear Solid 2 demo. That's very kind of them. So yeah, it was a phenomenon by them, largely by the success of the first installment of the MGS series.
Yeah, although I will argue that Zone of the Enders deserves its own love, because it's a great game.
Oh, it's solid, definitely. I just the temperature at the time was such, you could say.
Absolutely. But let's talk about Metal Gear 1 a bit still.
Yeah,
because this is one of those things that where I want to ask that. Do you think that it's good that the game is so memorable because it's cheesy, or do you think that it manages to be memorable in spite of being cheesy? Because there's a lot of talk among the fandom, and something that divides people is that what is the exact level of where it becomes too cheesy?
That's a really good question, and I'm not sure if I can understand. If I can really answer that well, because my impression when I did that playthrough like a couple of years ago was that I thought that it was refreshingly different, the tone of Metal Gear Solid compared to already like MGS2, it really feels like a product of the 90s of like that like cyberpunk era of cyberpunk storytelling era in Japan. It's got like Ghost in the Shell and like Appleseed influence there. Did Appleseed come out before? I might be wrong on that one, but that temperature of the day, that vibe of the day was there, and it the energy is different, and I would say that this is less cheesy than where it would go later on. So I don't know, because I also see that people suggest that, you know, one of the most iconic moments is, of course, the Psycho Mantis encounter. You know, where he reads your memory card, you know, and is like, "So you like to play Suikoden?" Which, you know, in the day was mind blowing. Like, what is he talking about? What? How does he know that?
Or put your controller on the floor and he'll make it vibrate and stuff like that.
Yeah, that I don't know. I think that would have felt pretty cheesy back in the day. Even I would not have been mind blown by that.
Yeah.
But the thing is, like, I see people suggest that because he's like the wackiest, he's the one kind of really supernatural thing in this otherwise military sci-fi thing, being like a psychic man. I see people suggest that he ended up kind of affecting the direction. His popularity ended up like making the really out of their elements like get more like, you know, become more at the forefront in later installments. I mean, the next installment has a vampire in it, so, you know.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's a good or bad thing, because yeah, like it's memorable for certainly. It's like really cool even to this day, just like to come up with that idea. But like the plot can go in weird places at times. Then in the later installments, like weird stuff happens. But yeah, it's hard because that's also kind of the charm of it. Like there's Splinter Cell if you just want a clean, you know, military sci-fi stealth game without any like many of those elements. I think MGS is helped by having the kind of weirdly fantastical in it. I don't know.
Yeah, I think so. But like, this is again goes back to the limitations being a blessing, because like, if you look up and listen to what Kojima had planned for some of the original plans for Metal Gear Solid, he wanted there to be a character called Mariachi, who would give you information on like the bosses or the mercenaries that you're fighting, but only after you listen to him sing a mariachi song.
Oh God, I've totally missed this tidbit. What the hell?
This was something that was in like his original plans, and they just couldn't fit it anywhere. And like there was all kinds of ideas. Like Metal Gear Solid 2 was supposed to have a character that could summon sharks and fight you.
Yeah, the Navy diver guy. That's true. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think that these kind of limitations are specifically what I think of when I think of things that are like thank goodness that this reined it in, because it does get very silly, but I think that that's why I like Metal Gear Solid the best, because it's silly. Like Vulcan Raven is a tremendously silly character.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I don't want to imply that there isn't like really goofy stuff happening in this one as well. But,
right.
It feels more like it takes itself more seriously, which just makes the goofy parts feel funnier, I guess.
I think so, yeah. But I think that also because it's just on the level of serious and goofy, that it works for me. Because by the time we get to Metal Gear 4 or, you know, the Guns of the Patriots and stuff like that, it gets so out there. And
right.
it gets so convoluted, and also because Metal Gear 4 had so little actual gameplay, and that was one of those things that, again, I learned only recently when I went to look at all these documentaries and all these, you know, commentary tracks and essays that Kojima has done. And Metal Gear 4 was the one that got hit most with, you know, cutting stuff, because they had a story they needed to complete, and it cut into the actual gameplay. Like in the original plans for the gameplay, you had all kinds of things, like you would actually be a member of these paramilitary forces. You could choose that, which country were you loyal to, and really interesting and complicated ideas that would have made for a really compelling gameplay, and they just couldn't fit them anywhere.
Yeah, and you can tell that when playing 4, because the first 2 chapters are like really evocative and are specifically about that like paramilitary action, and it feels like every chapter after that the gameplay just gets thinner and thinner in the last 3 chapters. So like the production is really suffering.
Yeah, and then of course that's not even getting into Revengeance, which is its own can of worms, where we start getting to that whole, how much cheese is enough cheese.
Yeah, but I think that's its own beast, because it's like, Kojima like outsourced that to Platinum, and now we're like, it's somebody else doing it. Like it's somebody else's kind of Metal Gear fan fiction in that sense, and they're like really trying to like get their own like crazy vibe to it. So I don't really know how to like classify that in that sense to the others when it's trying to be its own goofy beast.
And by the time, of course, then Phantom Pain, which never got officially completed by Kojima, that's only like 2/3 of a Kojima game.
Yeah, I think I never did finish it, because like I was put off by the like part 2 of the game is you have to like start like redoing a bunch of chapters. Like I fell off at that point. I thought the story arc up to that point was enough for me, but I understand that the like very last part of the game, they don't have any game anymore, so they just show you like a bunch of like design documents on like what they were planning for the final arc of the game to be, something like that.
Something like that, yeah. And then there's the whole thing, which is just basically like it pulls off so many bizarre ass twists in the end that make the whole thing feel like a big, who cares? Because it's so convoluted by the time, and that it doesn't really anymore matter in terms of story.
Yeah.
And I think that if we go all the way back into Metal Gear Solid, that's still because it's so early on in the whole thing, and it's so early on in the mythology that it works really well. That if you only played that one and never played any of the other games, you would have a complete and solid story.
It's funny you bring that up, because when I played through it, like I made that exact observation, is that I think Kojima's like said every time he's made a new Metal Gear Solid, he said like this is the last one. He's got trouble like letting go there. But Metal Gear Solid's story ends in a way, the first one really does end in a way that feels like, yeah, this story could totally end here. There's only one like story, like sequel hook plot twist at the end, which is about the third snake that they very briefly mention at the end. But even that's like that's like something like just to like leave you like be like, oh my god, what? Like they easily could have just like ended the story there. Like Snake seems to have like a really complete story arc there, and like ends in like a really good spot. So it's fascinating. Like it's such a self-contained thing in itself.
It is, and it even starts at a place where you don't need to know anything about the beginning, because if you look at go in the opening menu and you go look at the interrogation tapes, like that whole thing serves as like a really perfect setup of them going like, this is an old guy who's being pulled back for one last mission, and then at the end he manages to break away from not just his obligations to it, but his own trauma and his own past, and he finds people who could form a new family for him. And I think that's what makes it so special for me, is because that felt like Kojima going, well, I'm done. I told this story. It's a perfect trilogy of games.
Yeah. And then Metal Gear Solid 2 comes out, and now we have insane like conspiracy theories like stuff about shadow governments and what have you, and now we talk about like identities in digital age and all sorts of like, it just starts going really wild like immediately in the next part.
Yeah, by the time you have like what Solidus Snake, revealing that he raised Raiden during the Liberian Civil War, and like you have the absolutely like the AI turns out to be like multiple characters turn out to be AI controlled impersonators, and it gets so out there. And I remember reading from one of the essays is that when they were writing it, they had to also again cut down and pare down these characters because they had like a young teenager who was supposed to be like a assistant to Raiden, also an AI character. But,
oh my god, I haven't heard about that one. Interesting.
Yeah, and the teenager was supposed to constantly quote Shakespeare at Raiden. And like stuff like that had to be cut because even the people making it started coming into Kojima going, we don't understand what's going on. Like we have absolutely no idea what's going on here. And like just little things that really show that at that point it was really getting away from them.
Although I will say though, like, not knowing about any of this when I played Metal Gear Solid 2 as a kid, like when you hit the scene where the AIs like start to break down and reveal themselves, and the colonel's on the phone telling you to close the game, and like then talking other gibberish, and Raiden is running around naked and helpless in like this dark like military installation. I remember like being like actually uncomfortable. Like, what am I doing playing this game? Which no points. That's the emotion they want to evoke in the player at that point. So they got me really good. I was like really messed up, kind of. Well, not messed up, but I was like really like what? Why? This is really weird. I don't like what's going on right now.
Yeah, and it was one of those signs where you were starting to Kojima was kind of testing the water of seeing how much will Western audiences, allow for, because I'm sure that if it was just
interesting point, yeah.
Because I think if it was just in Japan, people would probably be a little bit more okay with it because of the kind of cultural differences in terms of what gamers, go for.
Yeah, and this was like compared to like, it was compared back in the day to kind of like Evangelion in the sense of like, this postmodern like critique of its own genre, and I feel like there were more things like that in Japan at the time. So I think this probably maybe I'd need somebody Japanese to like chime in on this point, but I think this might have been more the vibe of the time there, I guess.
I think so, yeah, and I think that's also the thing for me that like I did not enjoy Evangelion like at all.
Okay.
So I think that kind of, because I get hives when a material starts commenting on itself, and especially when it starts commenting on itself in a way that looks down upon its own genre or like what it is, because it to me feels like it feels like that. Well, if you don't like yourself or like your genre at all, then why should I care to invest my time or interest in you?
That's a way to look at it for sure, I guess. Yeah. That's kind of going on with MenGS2 then, because it's very critical of you, the player, via constantly shitting on its the player's avatar, the main character Raiden. So yeah.
Yeah, that was also weird to me because like I remember people were really pissed off for Raiden showing up and taking over from Snake. And I didn't care. I thought it was interesting because I like we just mentioned, I felt that Metal Gear Solid had already given the perfect ending for Snake.
Right,
and, like,
yeah.
And bringing him back and just kind of going like, well, we're still doing this thing with Otacon, and Meryl's gone, and it just kind of like it just completely washed away the whole cathartic ending of the previous game and said that, well, it didn't work out. So I was like, I was more disappointed with the fact that Snake was there than I was with Raiden being there.
Okay, that's certainly a unique take, but I think people have warmed up to that take a little bit more nowadays. But yes, I remember the reaction was not great back in the day to the surprise protagonist change, because they didn't really advertise that either. That was meant to be a surprise that, they were showcasing Snake a lot in the trailers coming out for that game.
Oh yeah, and also because they had like the trailers made specifically, like the trailers had been made specifically so that they showed Snake on the massive oil rig where most of the game takes place.
Yeah, the big shell facility. Yeah.
Yeah, and they had like specifically made them for the trailer so that people wouldn't realize that he's not going to be there.
Yeah, he's like in scenes where in the game it's Raiden, but like they swap the models in. Absolutely, just really mess with you.
Yeah.
No, I do think MGS2 is interesting nowadays. I'm really happy with it, and I enjoyed it as a kid actually, because I wasn't super media critical at the time, so I was happy with my weird military shooter stealth game at the time. Then later on, I was like, "Ooh, this is kind of weird," but I don't know. Nowadays, I enjoy it as a bizarre postmodernist, whatever the hell it is.
Yeah,
there's funny twists in it.
I think I've also warmed up to it a little bit more over the years, like as just a gameplay experience, because it again has so much stuff that it does that is just new and is something I admire, I guess. Like the fact that like little things like shooting the walkie-talkie on a soldier when he's trying to call it in and call for backup, and that the walkie-talkie breaks, and those are things that you don't see even in big budget games today.
No, it's like amazing attention to detail once again, just leveraging that PS2 that's like got so much more potential to it compared to the last console.
Yeah, and just little things again that really, really, really make it special. And I think that that's the case with all Kojima games, that even when I don't like them, I admire the attention to detail quite a bit.
It's very perfectionist in that sense, and there's some merit in being like that when if you can like pull off something like this.
Absolutely. But this was something I actually went to look at while we were talking here, which I thought is funny, is that the budget for the first Metal Gear Solid for the PlayStation 1 was $10 million.
Okay. And pretty big number, but like, I don't know, for the day, I don't know if that's crazy or not.
It's pretty big. It's listed here in the article as approximately the budget of a Godzilla movie at the time.
Okay, so that's in that sense it's a big deal.
Yeah. The budget for then Kojima's latest game, Death Stranding, which is a completely different thing again. No, it hasn't been officially revealed what it is, but the estimates have been from anywhere between $170 million to $250 million.
Aha, so 25 times possibly the budget at maximum. Right, okay.
Yeah, so it has gotten quite out of control on that area as well. And so I think that that's one of those things that I wonder what would happen if these days, if Kojima would ever get a chance to do another Metal Gear, that what on earth would that look like?
I wonder if he was given a small budget again, like today's technology, but we're not making a AAA game. Like, what would that again, like, kind of force him to squeeze out something like something, I don't know, something that has like some interesting concepts in it, but by virtue of having to like adapt to that format.
Yeah, that would be interesting to see, because like I would love to see what would happen if Kojima was given free reign but a lot of restrictions. I think it would be really, really cool to see what he could come up with, because again, I don't think he's ever lost the kind of interest to really explore and to take risks. So I think it would be really fun to see, like if for example, because there was a lot of talk for years and years that we would get a Metal Gear Solid remake, and we had that Silicon Knights remake, the Twin Snakes.
On GameCube, so fairly quickly actually after. It was only a few years really in retrospect later.
Right, and there's still, like, even now, there's still talk about a Metal Gear Solid movie, which I don't think is going to happen, despite that they've tried and tried and tried again multiple times. Yeah,
they have names attached now. The Godzilla guy, Jordan Vogt Roberts, I think, was attached, and then the one actor who's in
Oscar Isaac was supposed to be.
Yeah, that's the one I'm thinking of. Yeah, so they've got like names attached now.
Yeah, but I really don't think that it's going to happen, because I don't know what happened with Jordan Vogt Roberts. He was really, really big for a time. And like he had this momentum that this was going to happen, and then he has not directed a thing. I don't think, after that movie.
Yeah, I don't know. Let me have a quick look here. Yeah, no, actually, yeah, he's, Oh, he didn't do Sorry, I mixed up actors. He didn't do Godzilla. I was thinking of somebody else here. Never mind. My bad.
No, but he did Kong Skull Island, so he almost did Godzilla.
Yeah, I think that's what I confused it with. But yeah, that looks like he hasn't really done much after that.
Yeah, he did the live action trailer for Destiny 2, which I think was in 2017, and he did a couple of TV series episodes for a show I never watched. But like after that, he's been attached to stuff like Gundam and the Metal Gear Solid thing, and all of that has been like constantly like a thing that it's gonna happen, and then nothing's happened.
Okay, well, yeah, okay, so that doesn't... not a huge amount of then positivity for that, or hopes for that adaptation then, but I don't know, do you think Metal Gear Solid, if it was just like the first, something based on the first Metal Gear Solid, do you think that movie could be done? You did say that you think Kojima can't really do movies, but if somebody else tried to like adapt it into a movie, is there any hope there?
Well, I worry that every time they've attached people to it, and every time they've attached people or every time the people who've been attached to it who have spoken about the project, people have been talking about it with such kind of blind devotion, and talking about how like they want to make sure that they don't displease the fans, and they want to include all the mythology and all that, and I get really worried at that point, because if anything, it should be its own thing, and it should be its own, like, again, a singular good movie. It shouldn't be a thing where it's like, we're just going to throw in references and throw in sequel hooks, because that's going to make it so that nobody except a couple of hardened fans are going to be excited about it. And right now,
right, yeah.
And I think the big problem is that right now the people who are attached to write the movie, their credits include films like Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, Rise of Skywalker, Jurassic World Dominion, Monster Trucks.
What?
Yeah.
What is Monster Trucks?
Monster Trucks is literally a film as it sounds. It's a film about trucks that are monsters.
Oh, okay. Fantastic. Oh yes, a 2016 American monster comedy film. Well, I'll give them this. The poster has that lovely 80s like painted movie poster energy. But that sounds like a production.
Yeah, but it's like it's and I don't have a lot of faith in the folks who are supposed to be writing it, because none of their scripts so far have been for good movies.
This Jurassic World libel.
And also the Rise of Skywalker nonsense. And this guy, Derek Connolly, who is supposed to be writing Metal Gear Solid, is also now he is supposed to be also writing the Legend of Zelda film. So I don't know. I don't have any faith in this. I think that it's going to be very short-sighted kind of adaptations, and then they're going to be confused about, it's going to make a huge opening weekend, and then it's going to, completely disappear out of the public consciousness, and then we're not going to hear anything about the movie for years and years again.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I wish I could say I was hopeful, but you did paint a realistic yet bleak picture there.
I'm also pretty negative on game adaptations to begin with, because
fair.
I don't think that there hasn't been very many good ones, if any good ones.
Yeah, and like I do think there's been good ones, but there have also been properties that maybe lend themselves better. Like I think Metal Gear might be, like, as you mentioned, like if they're just gonna make a movie adaptation of the current one, I think there's not a lot of room there to like kind of change it up to like kind of make it its own thing, a movie, without it like losing something in the transition. So
there's also the thing that Kojima wanted to be a filmmaker before he became a game designer, and he couldn't find a way to get into film production. Like he was constantly having like doors shut in his face and told that you can't come in and you can't do this, and it got to the point where he just got so sick of it that he just decided that fine, I'll go do games instead. And because his entire language of game design has been influenced by film, but it's also been influenced by this. He came up with a company, and I think Shigeru Miyamoto also mentored him at a time.
Oh, interesting.
So he's come up through this kind of world where gameplay is king. And if you look at his early stuff, all the way from Penguin Adventure to Metal Gear games, and what Metal Gear is at its best, it's really heavy on the gameplay, and even the cutscenes are stuff where the player can manipulate the cutscene.
Yeah. There's Metal Gear Solid 3 was fun with that because you could switch into first person in certain scenes.
Right.
And then there's hidden parts where they don't give you a prompt, but you can still press R1 to look around and get some funny hidden details. And yeah, that was immediately kind of more, added just a little bit more to that.
Yeah, and you could change the entire flow of the game by killing a boss before you even actually meet them.
Yeah,
if you knew what you were doing. So there was a lot of that, and I think that's the whole thing that makes it so special. And I don't think that adapting it, if you're going to be completely devoted to the material, you're not going to be able to get the good parts out of that, because the big fun about it is that you are in control, and the whole thing reacts to your incredulous reactions to the game. So I think the movie would need to, decide kind of to be very removed from it. It would have to be its own thing. And I think that's why I worry that they're not going to do Metal Gear Solid justice, is because they're going to try and make it too much like the game. And then people who don't know the game are not going to understand why is this, important? Why is it important that Psycho Mantis talks about,
Castlevania.
Right. And if they were wanting to do something really, really special, they would mess around with the cinematic language. So, the Psycho Mantis makes it look so that the film is corrupted and the lights in the theater go on.
Mm-hmm.
Stuff like that. That would actually be fun and participatory, but I don't think that they're going to do that, because studios are so terrified of doing something different and doing something that would, even marginally alienate the audience.
Yeah, I think the most that would happen like that would just be an homage to that scene from Gremlins 2, where it looks like the Gremlins destroy the movie footage, and then it pulls out into a movie theater of people complaining about the movie cutting out, which, cute, but
Now, to be fair, if they did that and they would do the exact same scene of Hulk Hogan getting up and demanding that the movie continues, it would automatically be a much better movie, regardless of if it made any sense or not.
70-year-old Hulk Hogan standing up and yelling at Liquid Snake to put the movie back on.
This happened once already in the 80s, and I'm not going to let it happen again.
Oh, okay, yeah, you've sold me on this concept now. Never mind. This is a great idea.
But that would at least be different. That would at least look like a unique take on the material. And I think I don't think that they're going to do anything like that, because it would be too much, which is exactly what Metal Gear would need. So I'm not optimistic, but again, I think we've said this every single time we've made predictions, is that I would be more than happy to be proven wrong.
Oh yeah, absolutely. If anybody wants to make this movie, then take a shot, take a swing with the bat. But good luck.
Or alternatively, producers, if you're listening, I'm cheap. And I'm available. I will happily come and write this for you. So, Jordan, if you're listening, then just give me a call.
Yeah, you guys want real Metal Gear here. we got a couple of real smart people here who can make this dream happen. Oh, bother.
Yeah, but while we're in movies, did you know that Otacon, so Hal Emmerich, is named after Roland Emmerich, who is, according to Hideo Kojima, one of his favorite directors?
No, I didn't. I thought you were going to reference the fact that he's named Hal as a reference to 2001: A Space Odyssey, which is the more obvious reference. But,
well, yeah, that's also true. I mean, you have Hal and Dave, who are the characters from that. That's true, and also the fact that the submarine that brings Snake to the installation in Shadow of Moses Island, I think that was named after the spaceship from 2001. It's called Discovery or something like that. You can see it on the side of the ship. So you have those, but no, Hal Emmerich was named after Roland Emmerich, and I think that it's wonderful that Kojima likes Roland Emmerich movies, because
that makes sense. Yeah, like that. It seems like Independence Day would hit him well if you think about what Metal Gear is like.
Right, or the great cinematic classic of our time, Moonfall.
oh, right, Moonfall. That is. Oh, jeez. Oh yeah, because yeah, absolutely, yeah, like yeah. Now I'm yeah, you're right. I'm thinking of him like coming out of the theater like a year ago. Like that was a masterpiece after seeing Moonfall.
just deeply moved, wiping his eyes from the tears. Like oh.
That's hilarious. I love that thought. Yeah. We got to start shutting this down, but I don't think we can at least leave this topic if we don't at least reference one more element that was really important for Metal Gear Solid and its success, and that was, I think, the voice acting cast. I think that really, more than anything, contributed to the cinematicness that we've referenced, which I think is different from it being a story-heavy game. RPGs had thick stories for like a decade or so by then, but really the kind of like trying to make the cutscenes and everything look, and the cinematography being thought out, and then like having really strong voice acting in it. I think was really, really, really central to Metal Gear Solid. So do you have anything to say about the like classic actors who showed up in Metal Gear Solid, David Hayter and the like?
Well, I think it's one of those things again where it's just on the level of how cheesy is cheesy enough, because like you listen to the original or the English cast. And this comes in the late 90s, but they're probably recording it in the 97 or something. And it's at a time when anime dubbing in the West is still kind of figuring itself out.
Yeah.
I think that even the biggest fans of anime would not be able to with a straight face say that a lot of the dubbing in the 90s was very good.
No, not until Cowboy Bebop comes out with Steve Blum as Spike Spiegel and the like, which that's considered like a game changer, but that wasn't around then yet, I don't think.
Yeah, and like even the English dub, The Princess Mononoke, which had like Neil Gaiman and Pixar helping out with the localization and the directing of the dub, which also brought the whole level to a whole new standard. That was like in 97, 98, so it was like just around the time of Metal Gear. So I think that there's a level of, it's good, but it's also really like, it's really broad, the performances. Like you look at something like the entire confrontation between the Solid Snake and Revolver Ocelot, like the Patrick Zimmerman and David Hayter when they meet the first time, and it's like Patrick Zimmerman is chewing the scenery like no tomorrow.
Oh yeah, like 6 shots, more than enough to kill anything that moves.
Yeah, and like everything that they say has like the voice kind of lingers. You get the extra and everything that they're doing, and especially then you have Vulcan Raven, like we mentioned, is just really silly because it's supposed to be an Inuit soldier, but then he sounds like somebody's kind of going for a mix between Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger. Peter Lorre,
because he's like a very physically big man, a big imposing guy. So I think he's trying to be like that big strong man voice is what he's doing.
Yeah, and then you have Renee Rodman doing "This is Natasha Romanenko."
Oh yeah, that's hilarious.
Just it's really, really funny, but at the same time it works in that reality. And I remember that I really liked Kim May Guest as Mei Ling, and that was one of probably the more subdued performances. Like she's probably the most just kind of normal, and like even Otacon I like a lot because Otacon and Christopher Randolph, I think.
Yeah, is Otacon's voice, yes.
Yeah, and he does a really great job with a character that, because Otacon was supposed to be in like Kojima's original plans. It was supposed to be kind of a almost an insulting caricature. Like he was supposed to be big and fat who constantly eats chocolate.
Oh my god, I haven't heard that.
Yeah, and it was like it wasn't until the animators and the character designers came and said that what if you just made him a normal kind of person, that it got changed. And I think that Randolph's performance makes up for a lot of that, because Otacon in the first Metal Gear Solid gets a kind of bum rap. Like he pees himself a couple of times and is kind of a mess.
He is the bumbling nerd in the narrative. Yeah, he's kind of the goofball in that sense.
And even though he gets a really wonderful relationship between Sniper Wolf, who I also like a lot, I think that it's down to Randolph's performance that the character is so memorable. Hater is kind of funny that like his voice is iconic and the performance is iconic. I've always thought it's iconic because it's just borderline on silly. It's the same way that it's such an easy voice to make fun of because it is
Metal Gear, security camera.
Yeah, it's really, really goofy. And I am not sure, I haven't really followed Hader's career, and I don't really know what he's like as a person, but based off of they did the video during COVID lockdown, where Snake is just really bored and he just wants somebody to go on an adventure with him, and Otacon has to explain to him that no, we have to stay home and wear a mask and all that. And I thought that was great because it kind of poked fun at the how something as broad and silly would work in a real life situation. So I think that it's nice to see that Hader has a sense of humor about how silly the character is.
Oh yeah, no, Hader absolutely realizes what kind of role he's in, and what the meme potential of Snake is. Like he's a really nice guy in that sense, that I've at least what I've always seen, like when he interacts with fans and he does stuff like that, he's at least got a good sense of humor on him. He's good on that front.
Yeah, but I think it's also great, like, if you look at it now, of course, like, it's wild how big the entire cast of the game went on to be. Because, like, when they were doing this, they had to hide their real names because of the Actors Guild and, the whole... Because there wasn't a proper contract in place with voice acting for a game versus voice acting for animated series. So everybody kind of had to hide their names, and it took until, like, Twin Snakes, I think, that they got their real names revealed.
I think the cast of people in Metal Gear Solid 2 already has their real names.
Okay,
is my memory. So they got shit together by the 2000s.
Yeah, but then if you look at it, like, you actually start looking at who's in it, and you have, of course, Hader, you have Cam Clark, you've got Jennifer Hale, Christopher Randolph.
Yeah, who would become huge, Jennifer Hale. Probably, I don't know, maybe the biggest name, like, later on to come out of all of this, I guess.
And then, like, even like smaller parts, like Tasia Valenza playing Sniper Wolf, who's been in almost everything after that. And
Paul Eiding, who played Campbell, has been, like, in a ton of cartoons and games and stuff.
Yeah, and Doug Stone, who plays Psycho Mantis and did a bunch of anime. He was like a Ninja Scroll and Ghost in the Shell. And, and is now in the new Netflix series Pluto, which is the Osamu Tezuka.
Oh, neat.
Anime. So, like, it's really wild how, like, everyone, like, went on to be really, really big in this field.
Yeah. This is like proving ground for all these like big names, but in that sense, it's kind of funny that they like did get like these kind of. Well, again, it's because it's like the whole anime dubbing culture of the day. Like those weren't big names back then, and they clearly leaned on that front. But it's funny that they like struck gold in that sense in getting like a really strong cast. That was like a really stars aligning really perfectly for the guys making the game.
It is, and I think that, like, as a shorter answer would be that I think they are great for performances, because it would be really easy to trip over the kind of dialogue that Kojima writes.
Yeah, no, something went right here, because this is so memorable, and like it is fondly thought of years later. Like for whatever cheatiness there is, it definitely works.
Yeah, and I think that it shows that. I think in that sense, Kojima has gotten better with actors over time because if you look at then like, well, of course now he's rubbing elbows with Hollywood types, with Death Stranding, and everybody's giving great performances in that. But I don't think that they've ever had as much of a cast that understood the homework as well as in Metal Gear Solid.
That's super true, and I think that's also since they were coming from that anime dubbing culture, like they already knew what the scene of storytelling was. Probably helped in that sense as well.
I think so, yeah, definitely. And I guess I think, gosh, was it Hader? I think Hader was in Vampire Hunter D as well.
He may have been. I know that he was in Gundam 80 War in the Pocket was one of those 90s productions he was in. And he was in a bunch of here's funny trivia, like everybody used those fake names except David Hayter showed up by his real name in Metal Gear Solid because he had actually been using a fake pseudonym like during the 90s earlier, so he could get away with using his actual name.
Right, he used something like he used the character name from a show that he had done, or something like that.
He was in Guyver 2: Dark Hero, which I don't know. He probably still remembers that fondly because it's a very silly movie, but I understood. And like he used his character's name from that movie throughout the 90s as his voice acting pseudonym for I don't know why, but he just did that. Yeah.
Right. And I remembered it wrong. He was not in Vampire Hunter D, but he was in two other series that were really important to me growing up. One movie and one series. He was in Macross Plus, which was a 1994 OVA of the Macross series.
Is he in that? The only thing I ever remember is that Bryan Cranston is in that.
Yes, Bryan Cranston plays Oliver Dyson. In it, and but he is in. Yeah, David Hayter has a small part in it, but mostly he was the lead role in one of the original dubs because they've made multiple dubs of the film. But one of the first dubs that they made for Castle of Cagliostro, which is Hayao Miyazaki's first directorial film, the Lupin III film. And
right.
And Hayter played Lupin in one of the early dubs.
Oh, that's kind of crazy. What? Oh, I kind of want to look into that.
Yeah, I think he's also one of my favorite Lupin dubs because then they've made a couple of others because the rights have been passed down and every place has made a different kind of Manga Video Club made a dub, and then I think there was another company that got the rights later, and now I think with Crunchyroll has a new dub as well.
Oh, neat. But he's in this one specific from the 90s then?
Yes, he's in the very first English language dub that came out.
Okay, and as Lupin, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, and that was one of those things where I was really noticing that, hey, this is good. And it's tough competition because then Bob Bergen did also a dub for Streamline Media as Lupin, and he did a really good job as that. And Bob Bergen is also a great voice actor, but it's one of those things where they're all good in their own ways, but because Haters was, I think, the first one I saw, so I remember that.
Okay. Yeah, I think he was very pigeonholed for Snake for years, but I think he just does good work, and I know he's been in more other voices since his Snake gig ended, so he's kept it together. Now he also does write movies, and that's a little spottier, his track record there, unfortunately.
Yeah, The Scorpion King, for example, but he did also write X-Men 2, which is considered still one of the best comic book adaptations.
That's probably his one good his one good writing credit. I don't know.
He wrote a couple of episodes of Warrior Nun, which, despite sounding really silly, is actually a pretty decent, if very schlocky, TV series.
I'll take your word for it. I have never heard of Warrior Nun.
It's very silly. It's very, very much in that Metal Gear vein that it's you have to go with it. because if you start thinking about it for even a couple of minutes, it's gonna it's gonna collapse under its own silliness.
Okay.
But Hader wrote, I think, 4 episodes for it, and I think that they are really solid. It's not a great series, but it is something that I would recommend watching if you get a chance. It's unfortunately one of those things that it was on Netflix. It was on Netflix for 2 seasons, and then it got canceled. And there's no physical media release of it, and it's just kind of buried. And I worry that if it's not going to get a proper DVD release, people are going to forget about it really soon.
Huh. Okay. Well, I'll see if I can do something because I consider my curiosity peak at least to see what his writing is like nowadays, so to speak.
Yeah, it's decent. It's really good. It has a very very kind of a devoted fan base to it.
Okay, not bad. Well, kudos to Mr. Hader then on that as well. And okay, before we shut off here, of course, I do need to also shout out the Japanese voice cast, not just talk about the English cast here, but in Japan they had some big veteran names. So Akio Otsuka is Snake and is really iconic on the Japanese. Like, I would say Metal Gear Solid is just as good in Japanese or English because they both got just these killer voice actors there.
Wasn't Otsuka in Ghost in the Shell as well?
I think so. His listing is just absolutely gigantic of everything he's been in. He was Moomin Papa in the Japanese Moomin Troll. That was a trip.
Oh, that's right.
When I first saw Japanese, the Japanese, Moomin, I was like, oh, okay, that's weird to hear Snake's voice coming out of him. But he was also these old roles in Nadia, The Secret of Blue Water. He is Captain Nemo, who is obviously the coolest character in that show. So he's been around for a good while, and you look at his cast list, it's just nothing but tons of stuff there. Let me do that really quickly. I have this here. Let me see. Ghost in the Shell. Yeah, he's Bato in the.
I thought so. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a huge get to have him be Snake, for sure.
There's also, I think, Roy Campbell was voiced in the Japanese one by Takeshi Aono, he sadly passed away like 10 years ago. But
that might be, yeah.
He was in the Battleship Yamato series, Space Battleship Yamato series.
Right, the old school one.
Yeah, and those were something that were really big for me when I was growing up. So I remember him from that. And then he played Dakuan in Ninja Scroll. And Ninja Scroll was one of those ones that, when it came out in the West the first time, I remember it was one of the first VHS tapes that they started bringing. The Love and Anarchy Film Festival brought it to the country, and that was like one of those like you can make animations like this.
Yeah. Ninja Scroll, I hear the name often come up with these like kind of, the 90s era of anime, like people really mark out for that one.
Yeah, and like he also Aono did stuff like he was all the classic 80s stuff. He was in Fist of the North Star and Tenchi Myo. So like he was around a lot. He had a very recognizable voice, and it's kind of a tough actually realizing that like he had his Roy Campbell is very different from the Roy Campbell of the English dub, but I would argue that they're both equally good performances.
Yeah, well, it's the same kind of with everybody. Like, yeah, Snake does have a different energy too. He's even regular Snake is more laid back, I think, with Otsuka doing it. But it's really fascinating to listen to both of them.
Yeah, I think what the sad part is that like if there ever was a remake or a proper remaster of Metal Gear Solid, is that the sad thing is that a lot of the original Japanese voice cast has unfortunately started to pass away. Like, it's true. Hiro Mitsuru, who played Naomi Hunter, I think passed away also like a couple of years ago.
Yeah, she did, unfortunately. I remember because Super Robot Wars V was her like last voice acting role.
Right, because we talked about that at the time, that it was, and I think also was it Ocelot's actor Koji Totani? I think he's passed away as well.
Yeah, he died a long time ago. In Metal Gear Solid 4, if you remember Liquid Ocelot, in the English dub, it's Patrick Zimmerman, Ocelot's voice actor. In Japanese, they had to have Banjo Ginga, which is Liquid's voice actor, voice Liquid Ocelot because he had already passed away by then.
Oh, okay, so it's that long ago already.
It's been a while on that one, yeah.
Yeah, so there's all kinds of that. Like people are not getting any younger, so it's always sad.
But it would be an opportunity for somebody new,
It's
some
true,
new talent to step in. I'm sure someone's just itching to do the new voice to interpretation.
it's true, and I know Banjo Gingai is still alive and he's still acting because I think he was just a couple of years ago in another Lupin the Third video.
Yeah,
anime.
he's not super young. I'm just checking here. He's 74, so not him either. Like, unfortunately, the sad reality is that he doesn't have. He's done his majority of his work has been done. You could say, I guess.
But he is still active because I know he was in the Live a Live remake or remaster.
Oh yeah, and same with Akio Otsuka. Still, like he was just in that Netflix samurai. He was in the Onimusha anime that came on Netflix. He's the main guy in that. So.
Oh right. Well,
Yeah,
so there's definitely still they have energy in them. So if there would be anything like that, it would be really cool to get them once more around the microphone.
Oh, it'd be fantastic, but who knows?
Yeah. So I think we can agree that both of us have a soft spot for this game.
Yeah, I guess in summation, I don't think we have a lot to say, but I don't think either of us are super down on this. It's a pretty good game.
Yeah, there's a reason why 25 years later we're still talking about it.
Yeah, we're doing this instead of whatever else came out in '98. Like we're not doing the Tenchu episode. I mean, that's good too, but not entire podcast episode worthy. Sorry, Tenchu fans.
Yeah, and I mean, we'll talk about it at some point if we have any kind of a thing. But if you look at it, like 98, that was a pretty stacked year for games.
It was. I remember that year coming up in mentions.
We could have, easily done, if anything, about Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. We could have talked about the original Baldur's Gate, especially since Baldur's Gate 3 just came out.
Yeah.
There's one of my favorites, Medieval, came out that year.
Oh, yeah. Nice.
Yeah, Parasite Eve came out that year. Resident Evil 2 came out.
Oh my god, Resident Evil 2 and Metal Gear Solid in the same year? I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, that was a year because I think it was so that especially that was the year that Finland started seeing a lot of these releases, actually because Final Fantasy VII had just broken, the mold in 97 and everybody was like, okay, well, these games clearly sell.
Yeah.
So, and then also we had Half-Life on the PC. We had the Crash Bandicoot Warped. So that was coming in. Fallout 2 on the PC. The first Mario Party, and then if you were really into the stuff, you had Brave Fencer Musashi.
Yeah, that's true. That too. Yeah, absolutely.
And also Star Ocean: The Second Story, which actually I'm playing through right now because
it is also relevant right now. Wow.
Yeah, so 98 and 99 in terms of game releases. I'm sure next year we'll have a lot more to talk about because 99 was another one of those years where you're like, it's insane how many important games came out then.
Yeah, I think Planescape came out then, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, in 99 it was we had Donkey Kong 64, Final Fantasy VIII, Legacy of Kain, Soul Reaver. We had the first Driver, which, is, arguably a very niche title, but it was still important in terms of, getting cinematic storytelling going on.
Exactly, yeah.
The first Silent Hill came out in 99. The first Medal of Honor, Super Smash Brothers. It's one of those the end of the 90s were really, really big for what ended up being this kind of what we consider to be important games, I guess.
Yeah, or at least to our age bracket.
I think so, yeah. And then of course we hit 2000 and we have Final Fantasy IX, which is going to be its own thing.
Yeah, I think if we're going to have a retrospective episode in 2025, I think we have a shoe-in for what's going to be the topic then.
I think so, and I have a couple of projects going on right now where I'm very much trying to score some interviews with Sakaguchi-san and also Uematsu-san because both of these guys were such huge factors in number 9.
Yeah,
and they're semi-retired. I know Uematsu is retired now.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah, but Sakaguchi at least spoke about that he's making a new game. So let's see. Maybe
he's had a couple of this is my last game over the last few years, but he's still up to it.
Yeah, he was very much talking about it when I saw him in London at the Final Fantasy Festival, and he was very much talking about work continuing on a new game. So
Okay.
I do think that he's up to something. I don't think Fantasian will be his last one. But it would be really cool to get either one of those gentlemen down to, get some information about their work, because especially number 9 is that kind of a very seminal release in the Final Fantasy series.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's super important in the history of that franchise. So, yeah.
But we are running away from the topic again, but I think we have covered Metal Gear pretty well.
Pretty well. I don't know when I will return to this topic again. Well, you never know. I might play now that the Master Collection exists. If they work okay, I might play parts 2 or 3 someday on the channel. But
The Master Collection works well. I actually mentioned this in the beginning. It works well, but I was really disappointed that the Switch copy, for example, because I wanted to get a physical copy, there's almost nothing actually on the cartridge. Everything has to be downloaded.
Oh, that's lame. Okay.
Yeah, but I've heard now stories that apparently the Japanese release that you can order through PlayAsia, that apparently that actually has everything on the cartridge.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm interested in the PC version, but that sounds like a bit good too.
The PC version is just fine. It works.
Yeah.
It doesn't do anything really, new. Like if you got the release last year, this is basically the same thing. You get a couple of little extras like the scripts and everything.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's just fine. And also, I also tried out the PlayStation 5 version, and that one works just as fine as well.
Okay. Well then, I won't write those off then entirely. As you can tell, I haven't had a chance to play these Master Collections, but
yeah,
I will consider it.
But I am gonna probably try and get my hands on the Japanese edition if the local game store does a restock of, because they started to do a bunch of stocking of Japanese imports. So if they end up getting one, I will try and get my hands on it and see if it actually has everything in it.
Yeah. Well, I hope that works out then. Yeah.
Yeah.
But, right, we gotta start closing the shop here, so thank you for joining me today, Jonathan, to look back on this video game franchise.
We'll try again in 25 years for the 50th anniversary.
Oh, yeah, one more thing, but it always makes me laugh in Metal Gear Solid 3, Paramedic has all that movie trivia.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, she talks about Godzilla, which has just come out in the timeline of that, game set in 64 or something.
Yes.
54 or something. And she's like, I hope people will be hyped in 50 years, it'll be Godzilla's 50th anniversary. And it's just because I think or 40th anniversary? No, 50th, because it was set in 54.
Yeah, so it'll be 50th anniversary.
Yeah, because MGS3 came out when it was Godzilla's 50th anniversary, so they kind of shoehorned that in the game. But it's such a stupid line in the context. Like, in 50 years, it'll be this thing's 50th anniversary. Exciting. And it just feels so tautological. It's just like this dumb wink at the audience playing the game. But,
yeah. But that actually reminds me, and I can now have it here. If you are interested, I can reveal that there's going to be a single one-off special screening on the 1st of December for Godzilla -1 here in Finland in IMAX.
Oh, wow.
So if you are interested, then I really think we should go, because I would love to see it on the big screen.
I will get back to you on that. That sounds interesting, certainly. Yeah, exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah. But but for now, this has been great. Do you want to plug anything else? You talked about some of the stuff upcoming for you. Anything you want to drop real quick here?
By the time this comes out, I think, depending on when it comes out, if I don't know if Night Visions is happening already or has happened, but I have a pretty big compilation of movies that are being screened at that festival on my site. And there's like 15 films I would recommend. They're going to be coming on wide release anyway. So if you are interested in international cinema, I highly recommend that.
All right.
There's, for example, the first Czechoslovakian sci-fi film in like 40 years is being screened, called Restore Point. It's very Hideo Kojima style.
Okay.
It's about a future Prague where humans have a restore point built in that if you die an unnatural death, you are automatically restored to that kind of a spawn point at the start of the day. And it follows a detective who gets a case dropped on their desk where two people have died an unnatural death, but their restore points have also been wiped.
That sounds very like in the vein of Blade Runner or something.
It's very much in that. The influences, I pointed out that it's like Blade Runner, source code. It's a lot of Deus Ex, the video game.
Yeah. Isn't one of those set in Prague, or was it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
So it's got a lot of that, but I think it stands completely on its own, and it's a really fantastic film. It's the first film from a Czechoslovakian filmmaker, and it's insane how good and how mature it is, like right out of the gate. So big thumbs up for that.
Cool.
And other than that, I've had a bunch of new game reviews come out. I did a big first look about an indie game called Enshrouded, which is coming out next year. I got to play like about 8 hours with it, and it's like a Legend of Zelda meets Valheim survival adventure game, and it's a multiplayer game too. And I think that if it continues on the path that it is on right now, it's going to be the next really big obsession for at least myself and hopefully many others, because it's like, it has all the good bits about Valheim, but then it's got all the good bits about Zelda too, so that if you don't want to be building stuff, you can go and have like a big Zelda type of adventure in an open world.
That is a big sell, certainly, what you're saying here. So, yeah.
Yeah, so it was really interesting and really fun. I had a blast with it, even though this was like a demo of an early access game, so
right.
So it's not even nearly complete. It's not even nearly ready for early access. Early access starts, I think, at the end of January. But I think that already in this state, it was something that I had. 8 hours went by really fast. So I'm really excited about what it could be like. So keep an eye out on that.
I will. That sounds great. Yeah. Okay, well, as for myself, there's still a couple of, the games I'm plugging along here we have Chained Echoes going for some great JRPG goodness, old schooliness. We have Ys, Memories of Celceta, for that Falcom fix. I'm loving playing another Ys game. And still wrapping up Stranger of Paradise, which is that really silly Final Fantasy action game from Team Ninja. They're all quite nice, but I want to hype one more anniversary that's coming up this year. In December, it will be the 30th anniversary of Doom, everybody. So, as you know, I celebrate Doom's birthday every year, and this year won't be any different. Since it's a big round 30th, I am thinking of if I could do some kind of stream or something like little extra on top of my usual 20 years back retrospective of Doom. But I don't have anything set in stone yet. But 10th of December is Doom's birthday. You can at least expect a retrospective video from me from a classic fan-made set of maps from 20 years ago. So look forward to that, everybody.
That's insane that it's been 30 years already.
I know, I feel like we were celebrating the 20th anniversary just a second ago, but it's been 10 years.
Jesus. I was 6 years old when it came out.
yeah, I was so tiny at the time. Well, but,
it has stood the test of time.
It has. I'm looking forward to what comes up with that as well. But, look forward to all of that in the future, everybody. But we are going to be now wrapping it up, and hopefully we'll have a best of year episode as well. We will try to squeeze out, find some time to make the episode for that as well. So there'll still be one episode coming out in December, hopefully.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. But for now, I've been Minsk, and that's been Jonathan, and it's been a pleasure. Catch you all in the future, everybody. Bye!